Parts Manufacturers Association. Welcome to another one of our webinar series sponsored by the KPMG Canada. Title of this webinar is Best Practices for Securing Manufacturing Technology. We're going to give everyone another 60 seconds before we go live. Thank you very much.
Colin, you're on mute.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the APMA webinar series sponsored by KPMG Canada. The title, Best Practices for Securing Manufacturing Technology. A little bit of housekeeping. All questions should be typed in the Zoom meeting Q&A window, and the webinar will be recorded and made available on the APMA website. The APMA has been representing the auto parts suppliers for over 68 years. Our advocacy and support in regulatory and policies that directly affect our sector now includes support for the digitization of the entire industry, from the vehicles to the factories. The APMA has been leading in initiatives like connected and autonomous vehicles, Industry 4.0, digital manufacturing, and cybersecurity, making sure that our members and multiple levels of government are fully prepared for what most call the largest disruption in the last 50 to 100 years. In 2019, the APMA founded its Cybersecurity Committee, bringing together some individuals from the automotive, blockchain, AI, national security, insurance, and the cyber world. Our objectives are to change the culture, folks, when it comes to cybersecurity. On the 26th of May, the APMA also launched its Institute for Automotive Cybersecurity. The focus will be on governance, assessments, education, and technology. The Institute will help guide the automotive manufacturing sector through the digital transformation that we're all facing. Today, we are proud and happy to be joined by three panelists. John Heaton is an experienced IT risk and security transformation leader with over 30 years of experience. He brings over 25 years of pragmatic experience in helping clients to transform their IT risks and security organizations, solutions, and processes to meet the ever-changing regulatory and customer requirements. John brings extensive knowledge in information security risk management, technical security architecture design, cyber maturity assessments, application security, security compliance. John is a chartered accountant and holds a certified information systems auditor and certified information system security professional designations. He also sits on the APMA's Cybersecurity Committee. Our second guest is Shalabh Bakshi. Shalabh is the Director of Digital Enterprise at Siemens Canada and is responsible for supporting Canadian C-suites to realize their digital enterprise with roadmaps and technological solutions that will drive digital transformation within their organizations. He sets the strategic direction and manages business development, marketing, integration, and solution delivery, enabling product portfolios of software, automation, and engineered solutions for Siemens. Shalabh is an established technology thought leader thriving on engineering excellence and technology integrations related to AI, cloud and big data, manufacturing automation, and our beloved digital twins. And our third and final panelist is AJ Khan. He is the CEO of Cloud GRC and co-chair of the APMA Cybersecurity Committee. AJ has over 20 years of experience in governance, risk, compliance, and 13 years of experience in cybersecurity innovation and emerging technologies. During his time, AJ has worked on cybersecurity and GRC in the Middle East and North America in multiple sectors, including financial institutions, oil, gas, telecom, government, retail, and the manufacturing sector. AJ's cyber expertise includes building cyber governance strategies, policies and procedures, payment card securities, cloud security, and automotive cybersecurity. And AJ is also the director of the APMA Institute of Automotive Cybersecurity. I welcome you all three to the webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're going to spend a good, 54 minutes talking about operational technology, cybersecurity, best practices when it comes to the manufacturing sector and making that as secure as some of us believe our office sectors are. And in order to support and to kind of, provide kind of, a backdrop, as some of us say, a picture paints 1,000 words. We're also going to be providing, a presentation in the backdrop as well. So let's start off by asking that first question. What is operational technology and its role in Industry 4.0, the digital manufacturing, and why does cybersecurity really matter for Industry 4.0 / the digital manufacturing sector? Shalabh, let's start with yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Colin. I think before we even start on the operational technology side of things, it's important to understand what Industry 4.0 stands for and what it really means. And it really starts with integration, and the integration of what we call as the IT side of things, where information processing happens, where our office backdrop is, where a lot of product design, R&D kind of work also happens, but also integrating the shop floor, which is what we call on the OT side of things. How do we get that to work together? And this involves a lot of horizontal integration in the shop floor management. It involves vertically integrated, so basically integrating up to the IT side of things, and also to create digital models and condition models, which would help in that integration and that engineering excellence, which we talk about on Industry 4.0. There's a lot of things on Industry 4.0, as you rightly mentioned, digital twins, cloud technologies, and others, which keep going. But that's where it starts to become more and more complex. So when we look at the IT side of things, it is really about information processing technology. And information, whether it's relevant from a software or a hardware or a communications. So it's a technology which helps you to process that. But then you look on the other side, what we call now as OT, the shop floor. It is where there's hardware or software which helps you to control a particular system. And through that is where we control our industrial equipments, assets, processes, and that's what really refers to the OT side of things. And this is where the crux of digitalization comes into play, because you're trying to merge these two sides. You're trying to make sure that these two sides work more and more together. So you look, for example, in terms of how IoT is developed, which is Internet of Things, right? Or IIoT, Industrial Internet of Things. And you see how IIoT has evolved over the years, or by connecting, let's say, a physical asset, which was in a space, let's say a car or something, and it went to connect a lot of different systems. And then now eventually we are also looking at from a digitalization perspective, we're trying to each and everything in our plant to an IoT platform. And that's where digitalization starts to take place. That's where that vertical integration starts to take place. And the more and more you do that, the cybersecurity risks, which were there traditionally on the IT side, or traditionally towards when you were dealing with software of information technology, those risks now start to translate and come towards the OT side of things as well. So you cannot look into cybersecurity as a singular approach. Just how we need to stop our thinking on digitalization side by breaking those silos. It's the same approach in cybersecurity. We have to stop breaking those silos of thinking and look at cybersecurity in a much more comprehensive manner. It is a real risk, I must say that, and it's worthwhile for everyone to actually consider it and develop a much comprehensive strategy which deals not only with IT cybersecurity, but also with OT cybersecurity.
One of the, sorry, Colin.
I was going to say, and John, and your thoughts.
So, and I think, Shalabh, you described it well. You know, you used to be able to say, well, my IT and my shop floor and my OT are completely segregated, but they're not now. They're interconnected. Your operational technologies feed back to your IT. They feed information back, and then based on that, IT will feed back and deliver direction to your operational technology. So if I now have connected something that may never have been designed to be connected to something that went out to the internet. At the same time, if my IT is damaged, say I have a system that's used for SPC, statistical process control. If that system isn't available, my operational technology may not work because it relies on that to adjust its thresholds. So not only will cyber issues on the IT side impact OT, but also if I have an OT issue, well, that may be impacting. So I think what organizations need to think about is I'm now connecting things that in the past weren't designed to be connected, and I didn't plan for them to be connected.
Makes so much total sense, because if you look at a lot of legacy assets which are out there in the field right now, and you look at how we are talking about making those connections happen, this starts to become more and more risk. And that's why, I mean, in Siemens side, we also have what we call as the Charter of Trust, which is to work not only within Siemens, but with various stakeholders globally in order to develop a complete standard on what cybersecurity would stand for in the future.
Yeah, and when it comes to cybersecurity and operational technology, I think the most important question organizations need to ask themselves is how important is operational technology to them. I was reading a statistics that 45% of Fortune 2000 companies actually use OT to make sure their business runs, and the other 55% rely on industrial control systems to ensure, for example, transportation, HVAC, other systems. So obviously manufacturing technology is very important. When it comes to cybersecurity, they are doing three things which is very important from a risk perspective. One is whether from a business as usual perspective, whether operational technology is functional or not, and what are the cyber risks to them. The second part, which John and Shalabh actually mentioned, is the risk because of the digital transformation. So the convergence between IT and OT itself has certain risks. And I think the third part, which we should mention with regard to the current environment, is securing remote access to OT. So all these three factors make operational technology security very critical these days.
And let's focus on the sector at hand, which is the automotive sector, which is a manufacturing hub, which is where its money is, let's say, generated. Why is there a naivety, if I can even put it that way, to operational technology? And why is it, again, we talk about change the culture, but why do we feel that maybe a lot of companies, when they think about cybersecurity, only think about the information technology portion of it.
From a cybersecurity perspective, I think IT was the traditional leaders, and the cybersecurity governance structure was actually developed by the various IT teams. But cyber is bigger than just IT. Cyber can even include physical security. And because there is OT is a place where there is a clean slate right now as far as cybersecurity is concerned. So I think it is an opportunity also for organizations to actually leverage the expertise developed in IT security and use that for OT security through governance, risk, and compliance methodologies.
But part of what I've seen is that operational technologies are run by a separate team. They're run by a separate team. They've typically been completely segregated, and so they view, well, cyber, that's an IT problem, not an OT problem. And I think, AJ, as you said, what organizations need to do is identify what are their critical assets. We call them crown jewels. And I think you would find in most automotive parts organizations, their crown jewels are going to be their operational technologies, and the secret sauce in those, say it's a robot or a mixing machine, that's the secret sauce to your organization. So if, think about not just, the integrity of those systems, the availability, will it run, but also the confidentiality. You now have the secret sauce for a part or for a process that's critical to your business, or may in fact be, someone else's information that you're leveraging.
And again, where does this, who makes the call? Is it a top-down? Who's deciding that we need to have additional security, whether it be two separate teams, one IT, one OT, or one security department? Who should be making those calls, Shalabh?
I think it's definitely a C-level topic. It's definitely a top-down approach which needs to be incorporated along with anything that they do on Industry 4.0. Because again, it is something which is traditionally, as everyone mentioned on the panel, traditionally driven from the IT side. But internet is a really, really funny thing. So the moment you have internet access, you open your doors to the world. So and that's what happened why IT has taken such a strong approach towards cybersecurity. But the more and more that internet access, that availability of that openness comes into the OT side of things, this will become a big topic again, also on the OT side of things. So it definitely is a top-down approach. It has to be managed across the organization, and those silos approaches of what the manufacturing people were doing versus what the corporates were doing, those silos approaches have to be broken down and come up with a rather comprehensive strategy.
And I think one of the things we should be able to take away from the slide we're all looking at is the connectivity of products. The IoT or the IoT involvement now has gone from $500 million in 2003 to what's that, 50 billion by the end of 2020 or at the beginning of 2020. It's no secret. We are becoming extremely connected, which also therefore means we become potentially more vulnerable.
Yes.
And I would, organizations need to look at all those devices and think about, typically they've thought about availability. How do I make sure that the devices are available? Because if they're not available, does that prevent me from, building and delivering product to my supply chain and my customer? They also talk about integrity, because if it doesn't have integrity, then I may build, products without quality. The last piece is confidentiality. You may be obligated to protect the confidentiality of that information. You may have product designs. The amount of data sharing in the automotive parts industry is far beyond what you'll see in pretty much any other industry. You will get product designs 3 to 5 years in advance of the model showing up. Well, if that data is taken, then key intellectual property that isn't yours may go into someone else's hands, and you may be accountable for that.
And you hit the nail on the head. It's not even yours. A lot of the time that is owned by your global OEM customer.
And then the last one is safety. And I think that's the one piece around operational technologies that differ from IT is operational technologies, there's a safety issue. So, you know, if you're using a robot to pour chemicals because you don't want people there, and that robot spills the chemicals because it has the wrong coating or it's been damaged, you now have a significant safety issue.
Well, let's move on to the second question. What is the importance of cybersecurity for manufacturing operations, and are the requirements really any different from the cybersecurity initiatives that I may already know?
I mean, I'll take something here. I mean, we have to, when we talk about the importance of cybersecurity for manufacturing technology or for manufacturing operations, it's critical. It's critically important, and we have to not look beyond and just our history books. And you see the ancient Greek stories of the Trojan Wars, and which lead you to now the Trojan horse and so on, and which is a now popular malware even. So what we learn from the story is very obvious, and the obvious thing is that make sure your doors are locked and don't let your guard down. So when you talk about how important cybersecurity is for manufacturing technology or manufacturing operations, I say it's a must. It's a must to have that strategy, because as the slide says, you're only as strong as your weakest link. So it is not that if you have everything secure on the IT side and you leave the OT side a bit open, you will have a very secure environment. As I said, everything is now getting integrated, which is why the horizontal vertical integration, which is why now people are using cloud technology, which is why people are using open standards. So, and remote connectivity, I think AJ mentioned about remote connectivity, for example. So more and more people use wireless and IoT and mobile use. Your plants and your automation systems, they get more prone to hack. The networks which were existing, if they are not robust enough, and if they are not consistent across the network, then we have a problem. And lastly, even employees, you know, unknowingly can support hacking activity, just like how it would happen in the offices. So corporate security is as good as the weakest link, and that's why I say it's critically important on the OT side as well. And I think John hit it really hard on the safety critical systems, as we call them, on the OT side. And if they get hacked, we have a major issue because it could be a safety hazard then.
And I think Shalabh has pointed out what needs to be done. Basically, a holistic threat and risk assessment has to be carried out. What are your critical assets? What are the vulnerabilities in those? And what are the threats to those? And then what are the risks which needs to be mitigated and which can be accepted? So whether it's the network, whether it's the humans, whether it's the governance structure, whether it's the printers even. So you have to go through a thorough process, the cloud computing, you have to go through a thorough TRA, threat and risk assessment process, and come up with your results, then look at whether that that risk is acceptable to your organization. Is there business risk? Is there reputation risk? Is there any safety risk? And then based on that, put in the controls, and that applies to IT and that applies to OT in a similar manner. And Colin, your previous question, I just wanted to add, when you asked who is responsible for OT. So as I mentioned, cyber is an activity which is holistic. Physical security, IT security, cyber insurance, OT security, TRAs, all would fall under the Chief Information Security Officer.
So I think, you know, one of the questions that's been asked is, you know, in most attacks, the threat originates from an employee clicking in a phishing email or spam that makes it through filters. And I think there's an example of how security has failed. Security's failed because you have a filter that didn't pick it up. You know, I'm not sure that cyber criminals are getting more sophisticated. They're certainly getting more creative. They're actually spell checking. And filters aren't always picking that up. You know, this comes down to people. So, you know, I think, you know, AJ, your comment of who's responsible for security, everyone's responsible, because whereas organizations, I think we've got a slide that shows this, whereas organizations in the past were, you know, we could build a wall and no one will get through the wall. The problem is where is the wall in the world of COVID-19? You know, everybody's operating from home. They're operating from wherever with systems that wherever. You have lots of holes now, and we really need to teach people that they're accountable for cyber. They need to think, they need to stop and think before they click on that link, and they need to be careful. And then the other is stuff happens, and so how do you respond? Do you have you know, do you know who to call? You know, don't hide it. Don't it's not a failure, it happens. How do I respond, and how do I triage that, and how do I isolate that so it doesn't, you know, go beyond, say, the laptop, that it doesn't go into the servers or beyond that?
Yeah, I think it's a very valid point, and to add to AJ and to John, I think one of the most important things there is to understand what are the requirements, because when you want to assess the requirements of cybersecurity, whether these are IT, whether these are OT, I think that understanding is very, very critical in terms of what the priorities are. For example, I think the website or the web link on says it very well, where on the IT side, it's about ensuring that security of the IT infrastructure, whereas on the OT side, the priorities are totally different. It's about safety. Whereas on the IT side, the architecture can be very complex. On the OT side, the architecture is simple and very straightforward in that manner. In terms of applications, and that's also very important. On the IT side, where it's about video, voice, emails, on the OT side, it's about machine control and condition monitoring. So we have to be able to understand as an organization, as a manufacturing organization, that there are different set of requirements which need to be incorporated in that overall IT, in that overall cybersecurity strategy and that network strategy which we have. And then we can have basically two networks which are then interconnected in a way, but also separate, so that you kind of ensure the requirements of each side are met, but it falls still under that holistic vision then.
And so, you know, going back to the second question and also looking at the differences between IT and OT here, right? You know, the question ended by saying, you know, are the requirements really any different from what I already know? And the question to all of you, are they different? Are the individuals that I've hired at my tier one global supplying company, are my team going to have to change when I start to really embrace digital manufacturing and I have a lot more embedded technology, IoT type of technology into my equipment, which is providing information about my machines, my production lines? Do I need to change the individuals? Does my team look any different? Or is it really what I already have? I just have to repurpose it.
I think one thing that, you know, the IT side of the equation here doesn't include is the impact of cloud. You know, what we're seeing with organizations, especially under COVID-19, is rapidly deploying cloud solutions. Look, we're using Zoom. That we would have had an in-person session, and we've got Zoom running, so we can rapidly respond. In my organization, we're using Teams, and I know one cloud provider added close to 1 million users in Canada since this started. So I think cloud is dramatically changing the IT environment, what's going to happen on the OT environment that's similar, to leverage that level of connectivity, that level of openness.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
the activities from a expertise perspective, the cyber activities would reside with the CISO, the cyber team, but the OT expertise would remain with the OT team, and IT expertise would be separate from the cyber. I know banks where they have 500 people in the cyber team, and then they have their IT team separately. So the cyber team needs to be developed in any organization. The other part is, if I go in and I look at cybersecurity from a risk perspective, I look at the technology and I work with the technology SMEs who understand that technology and who understand the criticality of those assets to find out what is the risk and to make sure that there are controls in place for the risk. I was recently asked for assessing blockchain technology, which is a totally new technology. Similarly, as John mentioned, a cloud is something which, even from an OT perspective, if there's monitoring information going into the cloud, that has to be looked at. The third part is supply chain. So how is the supply chain been affecting OT? So all of those need to work together and to be assessed, and then to be the risk to be mitigated.
To add to it, Colin, and for the other panelists, I think we definitely need enhanced skill sets in the cyber team. The current cybersecurity team, if assuming that they're focusing only towards IT, you need an enhancement in that skill set, because don't underestimate the requirement of the process know-how. So when you implement cybersecurity in an IT space, purely office environment, the processes, the software use, what it is used for, that know-how is completely different from when you look into an operation environment. There are different set of communication protocols which you need to understand, how you need to secure that. There's a defense mechanism in the products, automation products itself. So how do you complement it? So that know-how has to be evolved, I must say, with the current set of cybersecurity, let's say, know-how or understanding. And that's why that OT specialization, if I may say so, is critical to the OT side of things. That's why in the past, when we talked about the networks or cybersecurity on the OT side, it was always handled by the plant management or within the plant, and everything IT was left out. But this is merging now, and it will be part of a comprehensive team on cybersecurity. But then people would have to become more hybrids. People have to understand what is the impact from the other side, which is coming into that holistic cybersecurity approach. So that know-how, that knowledge, I think, has to be continuously developed as we progress, also on the path of Industry 4.0.
I think the challenge is a lot of the cyber technology solutions were designed for IT, right? So if you think about data and protecting data leakage protection solutions were designed around SIN numbers and credit card numbers. They're not designed to go look at drawings. They're not designed to go look at code from a robot. They were designed to look at personally identifiable information or health information. They weren't designed for that other type of data. And so trying to apply those solutions to an OT security issue isn't going to work. And it's not going to work as well because, as Shalabh, as you said, the networks are different. The protocols are different. They may not run the same IP network.
Okay, well, let me ask you gentlemen another question. What are the key pillars to securing manufacturing operations?
Shalabh, I think you described initially as it's top down. It's got to be driven from the top, and they've got to identify what are the what's the key data, what are the key systems, and then it's going to have to get driven out from there. It becomes a business problem, if only because your customers, whether it's say it's a tier 1 or an OEM, they're putting explicit requirements on you to meet standards, and standards are now coming out. So they're expecting you to meet those standards, which means you have a business imperative. You can't bid on work if you can't deliver the security. And I think this picture provides a great example of the challenge that organizations are facing. On the right-hand side is not one moat and one drawbridge, it's hundreds of drawbridges, because everybody used to work in the office on a corporate computer on a corporate network, and as you can see from the video, we're all now working from our corporate home offices, and now the perimeter is now everyone's desk at home.
That's indeed true, and I totally agree with this, because it is a business problem. And when you look at when you want to define the pillars, you have to look at it from a business perspective. You have to look at how do you protect your business, right? So it's the same concept with in any kind of security environment that you take, and I would assume the best in the world are our security forces in that. And this concept of defense in depth, for example, also initiates from there, adopted later into the IT side for cybersecurity, and that's also now going to focus also on the OT side. So this is one of the key pillars of kind of delaying an a hack or an enemy attack in that perspective. So one of the critical pillars is to have that kind of a strategy which would layer your protection, so that in case there is a hack or a cybersecurity event which happens, you have enough layers of protection which would help you to kind of delay the process. And in the meanwhile, you can act on it or take actions. Right? So that's, I think, one of the critical things. But beyond this is also we have cybersecurity standards from IEC, which deal with processes, which deal with people, as well as So these are things which and technology. So these are things which form the pillar of cybersecurity, but each have to be looked into individually and formulate a holistic approach there.
And AJ, is the model not defense in depth anyway? Even if we look at an individual in an office, whether that office be in the plant or whether that individual be in an office environment, have we not had firewalls? Have we not had personnel training? Have we not had security software already in place? Do we not already have defense in depth versus the so-called kind of Great Wall, which may have a moat, which may not have a moat?
Yeah, well, actually, these days we have neither of them, because we live in a perimeterless world. So everything is in the cloud. We are sitting in our house. So to build that concept of defense in depth, a number of things need to be done. First of all, as we keep talking at APMA, is the culture change, the mindset change, that we all have to be security conscious. But beyond that, we have to look at the policies, the procedures, as you're saying, the training, but from a security awareness training, what are the current requirements for that? Do people understand? There was a question around phishing. Is that something which people are aware of? What about USB keys? So it's more about how aware your workforce is, and then you can layer that with the processes and the technologies which enable cybersecurity. Defense in depth can be applied, but I would not see it as just as Shalabh rightly pointed out, in most standards, it's just not the technology. It's more about the processes, about the people and the culture change.
I'm just going to share the next slide where I'm going to ask that question again, bringing in the cloud. So a lot of us are working remotely now. We are beginning to open up manufacturing, and so manufacturing facilities are beginning to tick over. And so just because we're having to run most of it through the cloud, can we not still have the defense in-depth type of model? Can we all elaborate to kind of describe why our network is and as secure as our plant and through the cloud?
So I think that the defense in depth idea that we're seeing is most industrial systems were not designed to be connected, to be remotely accessed. They were never designed in many cases with that. Functionally, that's how they operated. So organizations, if they're going to connect operational technologies with IT, and that's going to happen, they're going to have to build the right measures to protect those operational technologies, whether that's patching them where patches are available, whether that's isolating them and limiting who can access them. The challenge will be in this, this COVID world, I may not be able, in the past, if I needed to, make a change to a robot or a plant system, I would go down onto the plant floor and make that change. I may not be able to do that. I may not be able to get in a plane and fly to that location. So now I've got to do that remotely. In fact, I may have to sit at home, connect into my corporate network, and then through that corporate network, get to that device. I think one of the questions that was asked is, should we use, multi-factor authentication? Absolutely. I think, those people who access those devices are what I call privileged users, because they often have the ability to modify what they do, and it may not follow a defined change management process. So those are privileged users, and you should be monitoring who is a privileged user. You should be ensuring that you have strong authentication of what they do to make sure that, who says they're a user, they're in fact that person and only that person.
And AJ, if we talk about APMA IAC and we talk about our pillars, which are governance, education, assessments, and training and technology, as we look at this chart here from the left going to the right, you have to have your governance clearly defined, which is your policies and your procedures. You have to make sure there is education and training and competency with your people. And then you have to make sure the systems are functional, and are the latest. Then you go through to this kind of like, trusted partner as we kind of, delve and break into OT. But again, knowing that we're focusing on OT rather than IT, how much of it is different or how much of it is exactly the same, I guess is a question.
Yeah, I think what is relevant here is we did work on the APMA Cyber Kit 1.0. We brought that out in November of 2019, and that was focused on IT. But if I look at the principles of cybersecurity, and I do always try to separate IT security from cybersecurity, because IT security could be network security, we can put it in that term. And cyber is more on the governance side, it's the assessment, it's the controls you put in place. So those principles actually apply to OT also. And if we look at, you should have an organizational structure. There was a question which talked about the role of the CIO. The role of the CIO definitely needs to be there, but the role of CISO is separate from the role of the CIO. So the governance needs to reside with the CISO. As I always say, the CIO is more about enabling data connectivity, and the CISO is more about making sure that data connectivity happens in a secure manner. And sometimes security people say no to that also. So that has to be there. Then on the education side, cyber awareness, that needs to be there. The skill set for a specific technology. So OT security itself, what are the tools and technologies for OT security which needs to be applied? And then other areas like cyber insurance is something which on your OT side, does cyber insurance apply or does it not? So that also has to be looked at, especially in the days of working from home. So as you said, the 4 pillars of APMA, Institute of Automotive Cybersecurity: governance, assessment, education, and technology. All 4 are actually the pillars for building defense in depth for automotive OT security.
So let me take you to our next question, which is, asking a broader one, which is saying, what are the critical learnings from other industries? Now, how do we, as the automotive manufacturers, get started? Are we behind on this, folks? Is there other sectors, are there other industries that are ahead of us? Just putting that out, question.
One of the industries that has been, I've done a fair amount of work with is healthcare. And healthcare uses a significant number of technologies, many of them connected to networks, right? You think about, the nurse sitting at a station and monitoring, people in many rooms. They can monitor pulse and blood oxygen and numerous things without ever having to physically go and see the person. And we're seeing that now with people with remote monitoring of diabetes and insulin. So I think healthcare is one where I've seen that the IT function has morphed into they help manage all of the technology. They're really a technology management group. I've seen them where there's one hospital I work with, they have a Patch Thursday, and that includes not just IT, but it also includes all the operational technologies. And so whether it's run by the people on the floor, whether it's run by a business person, whether it's run by IT, they manage all of it, they understand all of it, and they, for example, patch all of it. So I think that's where organizations may need to go. And I think the question about, should CTOs, have to evolve into all technologies? I think potentially they will, because what's the difference between a robot on the floor, a big data solution in the back office, an RP, robotic process automation? They're all technology. They all require the same level of control. And they may, depending on the data and their importance, may need different levels of security.
Right, and I'll second that. I mean, I'll add to it. I mean, in manufacturing as such, not only automotive manufacturing, what we have seen is the topic of cybersecurity, how it is assessed, how it is taken, the influence of it is at a lower priority, I would assume so. Compared to, I mean, you have a very good example here with utilities there, and these are mission critical, right? Like if there's a hack happening and you don't have electricity for days, and there's ransomware which happens and so on. So this becomes a bit of a challenge there. So in the other industries like utilities, water, wastewater, even transportation for that matter, health sector, as John mentioned, there's a kind of a mandate even in terms of ensuring cybersecurity in their operations. I'm 100% sure when you ask them what is their biggest concern, I think the answer would always be, I have the fear of getting hacked. So this is what we have experienced when we've also worked with utilities in terms of what is the biggest concern there, and we find that this is of really high priority for them. Also, I would say it's to do with the number of incidents which have happened in those sectors, which also brings in a higher degree of motivation in order to do this. But then coming back again to manufacturing here, you go on the web, you can find out there are multiple websites. I mean, also on the dark web, that your assets are publicly posted there. So for anyone who needs to hack into your system, this will become, this is openly available. So it is not that someone has to do a lot of work, but of course there are cybersecurity standards which companies have adopted, which keep them kind of compliant to what their standards might be. But then it leaves out the picture of, are we world class towards it, right? So it's the same when we talk about digitalization or digital manufacturing. There are pockets of implementation which have been done, and the same in cybersecurity. Pockets of implementation have been done, but it's really important on cybersecurity side that it is more comprehensive, because as we mentioned in the first question, if you don't allow for it to be fully secure, you leave out something, you can still get hacked, right? So that's the theory behind it. So I still think the manufacturing industry has some way to go on this topic, especially from an OT perspective. But I see a high degree of interest and compliance and implementation from these mission critical industries.
And just before I let you go, Shalabh, your background and the company you work for obviously is a company from Germany, from Europe, but yourself spending a lot of time over in Singapore. The lens that you're seeing the Canadian automotive sector through, where are we? And don't be shy.
I think, so look, you want me to answer on cybersecurity or overall? But I think there's some way to go, because, with COVID happening now, and with overall the competition increasing, and with the USMCA implemented and all of that. So this will have a significant impact on our automotive manufacturing, whether it is the global OEMs here or it is the part manufacturers. And the more and more we look into enhancing our productivity with digitalization, there's a lack of, I have not seen anywhere where someone has questioned me, okay, what do we do on cyber now? Okay, I'm going to implement a digital solution, but what about cybersecurity? Mm-hmm. How secure are your standards? How secure are your products? Those hard-hitting questions I've not heard about in my conversations with the industry here. Conversations typically lie towards, I want to enhance my productivity, my quality, my processes, but that cyber requirement or that security requirement, it hasn't been very forthcoming, I must say. It is for us, we are bringing it to the industry here. And I think I shared it with you in the past that we have a global headquarter and R&D center in Concord, in Vaughan. And it's a global R&D center for the world, in Canada. And that's where we are supplying these hardware, software applications on cyber to the world. So it is up to us as industry now to utilize it, to adapt it. And we're seeing other industries other than the manufacturing, and in that also comes automotive, who are a little bit slower in terms of adapting and getting motivated to take that forward.
So we've got 6 minutes, and we do have some key takeaways. But before we move on to that slide, John, AJ, any thoughts before we move on to that?
Just on the comment of compliance doesn't equal security, absolutely. And I think what organizations need to do is contemplate not only how do I protect and defend my IT and operational technologies, what do I do if an attack is successful? We've seen lots of organizations that have done, tabletop exercises similar to business continuity planning, where you sit down and walk through what would happen if. Well, I think organizations need to do that. What if there is a successful ransomware attack on their OT devices? What if their OT and IT can't communicate, right? What if someone were to walk out the door with, the key code or key drawings that sit in a CNC machine? How do I deal with that? I think that's something that organizations need to do to be prepared.
Good point.
I would second what John just said, but to add to it, organizations need to look at it both from the compliance perspective and from the security perspective. So what are the regulatory frameworks which are applicable for automotive manufacturing? So on the IT side, for example, ISO 21434 is now coming out for vehicle cybersecurity engineering. What is the standard where you need to comply on OT security? So you need to look at that. But from a security perspective, you also need to look at what are the best practices of security. And as John said, what happens if there is an incident just today? So what are the best practices and how can you leverage cybersecurity to advance your business and make sure that your business thrives?
No, thank you. Okay, so our final slide, key takeaways for this 54 minutes of conversation. People, process, and technology, no surprise. Again, we have about 3 or so minutes. So if there are any key takeaways that you share with those viewing, listening, watching.
I would like to focus on skill development. So we've already highlighted that one, you need cyber security expertise. So cyber expertise, but two, you need OT security expertise. So that both those expertise are lacking in the manufacturing sector. And that definitely is something where APMA Institute of Automotive Cybersecurity is taking a lead. So that needs to be looked at definitely.
I think people as well. We're short people who on one hand understand risk and compliance, and on the other hand, technology, and then finally can talk in business terms. We don't have enough of those people. Add in, not only do they need to understand IT, but operational technologies, that is a significant challenge.
Right, and just to add, I think definitely people are key, but coming from the top down, developing a strategy, ensuring that strategy involves development of your processes, development of your networks of your people towards OT. I think that's mission critical there. And it's that thought process that one size does not fit all. I think that says it rightly. When you're looking into the technology for either OT or for IT cybersecurity, I think that's pretty important. And what AJ mentioned in the beginning, doing that assessment to come to that understanding is very critical there.
You need to know where you are. Otherwise, you're potentially shooting in the dark and alluding to there is no silver bullet. There is no quick fix for this. But we're going to continue having these conversations for the simple reason that we know we've got to change the culture. And I think we can hear that clearly from all of you as well. It's not a short game. We're in for the long game. It's going to take some time. But I think as government platforms like ISO 21434 come, which are going to be focused on the vehicle, I think they will start to force companies to rethink how they're manufacturing parts for those particular vehicles. Maybe a silver lining from this whole COVID era is going to be that the remote working opens up some avenues to strengthen our security as we continue to try and stay productive. But John Heaton, Shalabh Bakshi, and AJ Khan, thank you very much for your time again, and thank you all.
Thank you.
I think that is a wrap.